All right, so we'll start with the news of the OnePlus 10 launching globally as of last week. So, Govind, what are your thoughts?
Long-time OnePlus customer, still using multiple OnePlus devices. I gotta say, this one, it wasn't that hyped. Usually there's a lot of fanfare and noise about OnePlus, especially their releases in India, right? So
Yeah.
this used to be one of their premium sort of flagship alternative phones that was like super heavily marketed in India. But this time around, there was no noise. Like, in fact, I found out just like anybody else, just from tech news, right? In fact, I wasn't even like notified about the India release. I was
Mm.
actually aware of the US release before the India release for whatever reason, right? That's the order in which the news came out. But usually OnePlus sends out emails to their existing customers. Maybe I missed these, but there definitely wasn't any noise about the OnePlus 10 or the 10 Pro coming out, right? It was just very sudden.
Which is pretty weird, right? I was a
I know they focus.
yeah.
They focus a lot on the Red Cable Club,
Uh-huh.
of which I'm a member, right? Because I'm a OnePlus owner. It's pretty standard when it comes to that. But I think their marketing push wasn't done as heavily, even to their existing customers. I don't know, there might be some reason behind it, but
Okay. So I was a long time OnePlus 5 user until maybe 4 months ago. So yeah, before we talk about our experiences, we'll just quickly sort of go through the spec sheet in case anybody hasn't. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people actually haven't been informed based on your experience that this phone launched. So it's got a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 mobile platform. It's got supposedly super fast charging, the Super VOOC or Super VOOC charging with a 50-watt wireless charging capability. It now has an LTPO screen, which is the variable
very
refresh
good.
rate. Yeah, the variable refresh rate that can actually
Optimized
go.
battery
Yeah,
usage, right?
exactly, go down to an extremely low frame rate to optimize battery usage. So this brings OnePlus to feature parity with, I guess, the Samsung flagship from last
Exactly.
time. Yeah.
Exactly. And this was one of those cost-cutting moves as well, right? So
Yeah.
earlier, OnePlus, the Pro devices at least, didn't have the LTPO panels
Yeah.
because, well,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was too expensive to implement those.
Mm-hmm.
What is interesting for me is that wireless charging at 50 watts.
Mm.
You know what always, so to say, grinds my gears with wireless charging is
Yeah.
you can buy a wireless charger. Like, there's tons of those available.
Yeah.
It never comes with a proper adapter, right? It's very, very
Oh,
hard to find a proper adapter with a wireless charging puck, a Qi charger,
I
right?
see. I
So
see.
it's not very optimal, right? When they say 50-watt wireless charger, fine. If you can use the same adapter, great. But if you're trying to market just that wireless charger, or if
Mm.
you're at all selling a wireless charger, I think you should include the option of a adapter as well. And this
I
goes for
see.
all wireless chargers.
I
Sorry, this
see.
is a bit of a tangent on the OnePlus thing, but just generally wireless charging on its own,
Uh-huh.
it's yeah, this is where the roadblock is, right? So you buy a charging puck and then you have nothing to plug in, right? So to get the optimal wattage, so to
Yeah.
say,
Yeah. Yeah.
you need something that's compatible.
It's a real mess, right? These power delivery standards, because they're all based off of the same connector USB-C, but then every company has their own sort of charge standard. OnePlus generally was good about this because of the so-called red cable sort of that was a unique brand identity that allowed OnePlus users to know, oh yeah, oh it's cool, this is a OnePlus cable, I should get dash charge or I could get warp charge. But yeah, you're right. Like there's a differentiation in the puck, the charging adapters, the wall warts as we call them here in the US. That changes. That is now changing between brands. It's a bit of a mess. Yes, it's I agree. But moving on, like I've also wanted to talk about their Hasselblad collaboration, which started from the previous generation, which was been a bit of a mixed bag, right? Because they made a lot of noise about this camera collaboration, and in the previous
Yeah.
generation, when the reviews came out, the initial reviews at least weren't so great about the camera performance when compared to flagships, given how they were trying to position the phone. right?
I
So
mean, that's always been the case, right? So, I mean,
that's true.
nobody's new to this. This
That's
is
true.
a branding opportunity. This is a way to boost sales. There's nothing more than that, right? So,
Mm,
obviously, with phones nowadays, there's a lot of processing capacity to improve the picture quality.
yeah.
Now, bringing Hasselblad into the equation, it's more like, okay, so we have to have something to talk about
Yeah.
besides everyone else, right? So you have all your different. What phone brand has Leica imaging?
I
Just
forget. I forget. Yeah.
yeah. So it's the same thing all over again, right? So it's all of these different flagship esque brands that feel the need
Mm,
to collaborate just to get a
mm-hmm.
marketing bump, right?
I see.
But in terms, I have a OnePlus disclosure, right? I have a OnePlus 9 that I'm using
Mm-hmm,
right now,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and it's got that Hasselblad collab.
mm-hmm,
Honestly, there aren't too many features that come off of that. I think there's one,
mm-hmm.
but it's not something that you use every day, or it's not a
Mm,
something that your go-to is going to be. It's just something
I
that's
see.
there just to close out that loop of branding.
I see. I see. Yeah. So it's interesting, but yeah. I had been waiting for probably 2 years to upgrade my OnePlus 5. I absolutely loved that phone. And at the time, I'm struggling to remember how much I paid for it. It was significantly less than flagships at the time. Uh, but the value proposition of the OnePlus 5 when compared to its competitors was fantastic. Yes, you did not
Yeah,
have you did not have wireless charging, and you did not have the IP rating for water resistance. Those were the only two things you were giving up for. Everything else was fantastic. You had pretty much class equivalent specs in terms of performance, storage, memory. Even displays weren't.
headphone jack.
I mean, so
I know
I
that ship has sailed,
that's
right?
that 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 ship has definitely sailed, I guess. But yeah, it that value proposition has been diminishing generation after generation since because of the price creep. And yeah, that's a good segue into actually the prices for the OnePlus 10. So in the US, only the Pro has been released. The 8 GB 128 version of the Pro, the 256 apparently is coming soon. And in the US, it's 899, so $900 for that phone, which is pretty steep. Um,
Right.
it is pretty comparable to what you would pay for the base, I guess, iPhone 13. You generally don't
Yeah.
get the pros. You might have to pay another $100 to get an iPhone 13 Pro. But then, like maybe with another $150, you get an iPhone, which is a big deal in the US, right? So,
Yeah.
like there's a lot that you give up by not being in the iPhone ecosystem in the US. iMessage is bigger than WhatsApp, at least with the local in the local market here in the US.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's exactly $100 cheaper than the iPhone 13 Pro, but man, it's you know it's 900 versus
Hold
$1,000.
on. It's $100 cheaper than the iPhone 13 Pro. So
Yes,
not the 13, right?
yeah, the Pro, yeah,
Yeah, that's a very competitive space, right?
yeah,
So that's where all your Android flagships are going to be. So
yeah.
yeah, good on iPhone for I mean OnePlus for getting there, to that price point. But that's not what they've been selling so far.
And I mean, like, so if you look at the like the Apple page in the US, the iPhone 13 sells for exactly what they're asking for OnePlus, right? It's 799 just for the base
Right.
iPhone 13. And there are a lot of people who prefer smaller phones. If you prefer the 13 mini, which has exactly the same specs as the 13, you can save
Mm.
$100, in fact. And I don't know what the sales figures are for those two submodels, but people, there are a lot of people who are happy that iPhones are or Apple is releasing a smaller iPhone. You know,
Yeah, I
because
know there's been some noise about the 12 mini ever since it came out and the
yeah,
13 mini
yeah,
after,
yeah,
right? Obviously, if they wasn't successful, then they wouldn't put it out. It's Apple,
yeah,
right? So
yeah, yeah,
they're not going to put out a 13 mini if the 12 mini didn't make a lot of sales.
yep.
Um, absolutely right. Like I know, like people within the circles that I, go around, um, people were really huge fans of that iPhone 5, iPhone, SE size
Hmm.
and form factor.
Yep, yep.
Um, and now, while this isn't exactly the same size, but it is considerably smaller than the regular size iPhone, which is quite
Mm,
big by itself. Because,
yep,
yeah, don't even talk about the pros. Just the regular iPhone itself
yep.
is huge.
Oh yeah,
So as
absolutely.
soon as you put a case on it, it's just massive.
Yeah. The other topic I wanted to talk about was Apple's growth, especially in the smartphone space in India, and the ultra premium smartphone segment. This is again news from last year, but it was sort of the
Right.
latest information that I could get that's public. Was that the ultra premium smartphone segment grew by approximately 60 to 80% and was mostly driven by Apple. This ultra premium
Wow.
segment is defined as the segment above $700. And what was
Okay.
interesting about this news article was that they attributed it to actually COVID. So people who did still manage to keep a job or were okay financially, generally the people who are targets of this ultra premium segment, the fact that COVID hampered other discretionary spends like outings
Yeah.
and vacations and things like that. People went ahead and took that money and spent it on things, right? So like and
Yeah.
and Apple's growth has been absolutely spectacular. So this chart that I'm showing on screen shows Apple at a 49% market share in this ultra premium segment, followed by OnePlus at 32% and Samsung only at 9%. This was as of
Do you
Q2
know
2021. Yeah.
if do you know if some of that might be results of, well, COVID, yes,
Hmm.
but more of enterprise purchases happening on iPhones? Because I know a lot of enterprise customers who need to buy a lot of these mobile devices for their employees and everything. They would
Interesting.
like to have the um, backing of sort of Apple when it comes to security, right?
Interesting, because Apple's not the
It
first
could drive
brand.
up sales a lot.
Yeah, Apple's not the first brand that I think of when it comes to enterprise. But then again, which phone is? Since the BlackBerry died, there hasn't been a phone that is exclusively enterprise, right? BlackBerry was the enterprise phone for the longest time because of how much enterprise support they gave, right? Like it was the way to have email on your phone, enterprise email on your phone. You could buy a BlackBerry box and keep it on premises. That handled it was your mail exchange server for BlackBerry, and it was it had all of the encryption standards. Your data was localized to your enterprise. That world has long gone since the disappearance of BlackBerry. So I'm not sure exactly. Like I don't have enough
I don't
information to
think
kind of talk
it
about it.
would work the same way with Apple or iPhone.
Yeah, I mean that
It's
model has
more the
changed.
case
Yeah.
of all your MDMs, right, or mobile device management
Mm,
softwares that
I see. Yeah.
enterprises need to use.
Yeah.
I think those have a lot more stricter controls when it comes to iOS
Hmm.
devices
Yep.
rather than Android ones, right? So
Hmm.
um, I'm just putting it out there, devil's advocate, right? So if that could be a driver for that sales figure for Apple phones during
Hmm.
COVID,
I
just
see.
skyrocketing. I'm sure it's people spending their money in towards Apple's pockets rather than going on vacation,
Yeah.
but this could be a thing as well. Just speculative,
I mean,
could be a thing.
the other thing that's also interesting is that this purchase is more of a I forget what the word is, like colloquially we'd call it a flex, right? But
Mm.
there's this word that people use in the automotive segment. It escapes me what it's called. It's like not like ambitious, but it's kind of like a anyway. So generally, if you're spending that amount of money, you're getting close to 1 lakh or above for your phone, a handheld device that you're carrying around in India. There are phones that are more expensive than the iPhone. There are the Samsung foldables, right? Those would also be a flex, but I feel like to a large segment of the population, showing people that you have an iPhone is still more prestigious than showing that, oh, I have a Samsung, which also happens to make 20K, 30K, 10K rupee phones, right, in India. So maybe that's
true.
some of the psychology behind it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no doubt there, right? So it's
Yeah.
about the badge. It's
Yep.
nothing else,
Yep.
right? So
Yep. Yep.
it's just the same reason as if someone were to buy, let's say, a BMW that's
Yep.
used
Yep. Exactly. I was thinking of
versus
premium
a new
cars. Yeah.
something else, right? So just
Yeah.
premium car that's used versus something that's brand new that's affordable
Yep.
to them.
Yep. Yep.
At that point, it's just about the badge. And, I'm sure, I could be wrong, but I'm sure that this would reflect the same way when you look at the iPhone per SKU sales, right? So they're probably pushing a lot more of their entry level phones with your base configurations
Yep.
rather than the premium ones, right? Because the jumps that Apple does just to get more storage
Yep.
is quite substantial. That people are not going to do that jump unless they have a valid reason to do
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Yeah.
And specifically in the price sensitive market that we are in India, I don't see a lot of people doing that just to get an iPhone and make sure that it's the most premium one, right? If it was visually different, like if you go to gold iPhone, yeah, people are going to talk about it. That's a flex, like you
Yeah.
said, right? So
Yep.
that's a
Yep.
flex.
Yep.
But specking it up to have 1 TB of storage
Yeah.
is not going to get you anything, right? It's an iPhone. That's it.
And the genius of Apple when it came to having that camera differentiation between the Pro and non-Pro by having two very large visible circles versus three very large visible circles. Because, just across the room or just, somebody holding the phone, immediately it is visible and apparent that, oh, this guy has an
I know.
iPhone Pro. Oh my
And
God.
And they have those stickers now, right? So which you can mock your iPhone to become a pro, like just stick on another camera
Oh
lens.
my God. Oh my God.
I know
Yeah.
you have a good adage from someone in your family about what it looks like.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So disclosure, I have an iPhone 13 Pro. That's what I eventually transitioned to from the OnePlus 5.
OnePlus.
And when I took my phone and kind of showed it off to my dad over a video call, he looked at it. He has no idea about the cell phone market, right? He's not like a big technology enthusiast like some of us are. So I took my phone and I was like kind of proudly showing it off, like, hey, look at me, I'm part of the three camera club, or so forth. And he looked at it and he was like, oh, your phone looks like a coconut. So that was really funny. It was just like because
It's going to take a while for people to get that. I in the risk of ruining the joke with explaining it.
Yeah,
It's the bottom of a coconut. If you're familiar with it, has these little dots.
Yeah, the eyes of the coconut, as they call them. Yeah. Or to other people. To people who may not have actually seen a coconut, it looks like a bowling ball.
Right.
The
also
holes,
true.
yeah,
That's
the
also
holes
true.
on a bowling ball. Yep, absolutely. But yeah, again,
So
another.
going back,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, just going back on OnePlus, right? Since you mentioned it again, we're going to look at how OnePlus is now a sub brand. It's not even a brand by itself. It's a sub brand
Oh yeah.
of the parent company, right? So they've had that little merger now recently with Oppo, right? And that's a big step. I'd argue that's the biggest step for OnePlus, enthusiasts or hardcore enthusiasts of OnePlus phones.
Yeah.
Is what you've essentially done is take one of the biggest propositions from your phone and throw it out the window, right?
Yes.
Oxygen OS was the nearest thing you could have to getting a, pretty standard Google Android experience, right? So that's,
absolutely.
In fact, I could argue that it was even better than the standard one because you had these little cool customizations that you could do, which weren't too heavy, right?
And optional.
Completely cool, necessary,
and optional. Yes.
And it wasn't bloaty. It wasn't like some other brands do where they push a bunch of stuff to you just for the sake of, they've signed up with somebody else to do that on every device. So essentially what they've done is throw all of that out, OnePlus 1 all the way to OnePlus 9.5. I would say 9.5 because I have my OnePlus 9 and it got upgraded recently in January, right? So until then I was happy. And to be honest, like I was a little disappointed, right? As soon as this change happened, a lot of the same features are there, to be fair to it. A lot of the same features are there, but you've essentially thrown out that core Android experience where keeping it bare bones was very close to the, brand.
Yeah, yeah. And the image that I'm sharing on screen for the video version of the podcast is essentially OnePlus's current strategy now that they've become a sub brand or a sibling brand to Oppo, is that the Oxygen OS is, which is what OnePlus uses on their phones, now shares a unified OS code base with Color OS, which makes sense since these are all part of the same sort of parent company. But it looks like, the company's focus is to get out the Chinese versions of these phones first, which is what we saw with OnePlus this time around as well. There was a full month or month and a half between the OnePlus 10's release in China versus the global release that happened, say, 2 days ago. And this the kinks in this new code base, or managing operating system releases using this new model, have not been fully worked out, which is kind of the reason for the delay of the release of the OnePlus 10, as reported by multiple news outlets. Um, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I was a huge fan of Oxygen OS. I was coming from the OnePlus 5. The amount of feature updates that OnePlus gave us without any promise of that from, when you were buying the phone. Like the biggest example I can think of was, yes, we had a fingerprint reader, but when we jumped to the next version of Android on OnePlus 5, OnePlus was like, "Hey, guess what? We're going to give you Face ID for free." it was
Yeah.
uh, it was absolutely spectacular
And
that
it
they
was
were.
fast.
It was fast.
Really fast.
Yeah, it was
So
fast.
they could have done that from the start, but they just held back.
Uh,
Some other brands would have just kept it for the new model.
no, it was not necessarily that it was held back, but it was because that concept didn't exist until Apple came out with the iPhone 10. And
Yeah.
then they were like, "Hey, wait a minute! This is actually not that difficult to do. We just a little bit of camera trickery here, a little bit of machine learning there, and you have it." And they
I mean,
push
to be
push.
fair, it
Yeah,
isn't as sophisticated as Face ID on iOS, right? So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's not
There's
the
no
same thing.
there's no depth sensor. I think they also give you a warning that it's not as secure. It could be fooled by
Yeah.
a photo of your face, sometimes because they can't perceive depth, right? So yeah, it's and my experience with that OnePlus 5 has been so good in terms of like how long OnePlus supported it. We got, I think, three whole mainline Android updates, if I'm not mistaken. Like, we went from,
Yeah. So
yeah.
they've standardized those now. I think you get two
Mhm.
OS upgrades, which are
Yeah.
like full-fledged,
Yeah, yeah.
complete new versions of Android,
Jumps,
and
yeah.
then another 3 years of security updates.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Their
Yeah.
life cycle is 5 years. I think that's set.
Mm-hmm.
After that, you don't get any support, is what I
And,
think
and
is accurate.
and 5 years is fantastic for a phone. 5 years is sort of the benchmark, like, because
It's hard to say that anymore. So it's like, I mean, it used to be the case, right? You
oh, I see. Okay.
previously, if you had a phone and you didn't have a flagship phone, you would be struggling to push it past 3 years. Like
Correct.
battery issues aside,
Yeah,
battery
that's
issues
true.
aside, you'd be struggling to push. But nowadays, phones are so good that they're going to last you a while before you have to upgrade.
And there isn't much
And
and all updates are incremental, right? There are no major feature updates that make you say, you know what, oh, I need to ditch this phone and get the next one. Those updates are so
exactly.
incremental. Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I agree.
And just the evolution of both of the mainstream operating systems
Yeah.
is not, like you said, it's incremental. It's not like night and day where everything's different about it, including all your, all the stuff that plays around with any of the hardware optimization of the phone.
Yeah.
So it's going to run for longer. Besides the battery thing. Battery, once you replace, you probably get another life out of it. But
Yeah.
besides the battery, everything it's stretchable to about, I would say, safely. A lot of people can get away with 6 to 7 years on a phone.
6 to 7, yeah. If they bought
If you're stretching it,
and if you bought a flagship at that time, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's conditional. Yeah.
Yep. That's possible. But yeah, just capping off the discussion on OnePlus, we'll talk about kind of what the future looks like, or at least nobody can predict the future, obviously, but our impressions of how OnePlus is gonna go forward. So, like, the thing that I want to say is, OnePlus has clearly pivoted away from their famous slogan of "never settle." Like, so if you're buying a OnePlus 10 Pro, you are settling at this point. You're paying marginally less
Yeah.
for a smaller value proposition. So you are basically settling for OnePlus at this point. And it's very
Yeah.
different from when you were buying a OnePlus 5 or OnePlus 6. And that's what I feel.
It's
How
a
about
lot of noise in that same pricing space also. It's not like
yeah.
the earlier days of OnePlus where they were competing in a mid segment where their pricing was very small, but then you were
Yeah.
getting all the flagship features, or at least 95% of the flagship features, which was a good proposition. But now they're competing in the flagship space, and they're not going to make a good effort out of it, because why would you go for a OnePlus device when you have
Yeah.
more established brands putting out more technologically, arguably technologically superior products, right? So like Samsung, right? So they're
Yeah.
always on the, the epitome of all the tech advancement, right? So if you get a flagship device from Samsung, you know that they've driven at least one of those components within that device based on their own R&D, right?
Yeah.
So you know how Samsung gives out their panels to
Oh yeah.
Apple and everything else, right? So they do a lot of development by themselves. Now, why wouldn't you go for that like first-hand benefit?
Yep.
It's the same thing like the LTPO panel on OnePlus 10 Pro now, right?
Yep.
Why didn't they do that last year? They didn't do that last year because it was expensive to do that last year.
Yes, yes, and supply chain and all that stuff. Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.